Hello world, this is Kevin from Fiction Factory. You're listening to DC and DH on the DND Dynamite 80s podcast.
All right, guys, welcome into a happy new year to you, 2022. And this is our first podcast of the year. And glad to have our special guest, Sydney Taylor, is from the Philadelphia area. And she is most definitely a person that we want to talk to about heavy metal. And particularly because of what we do here, we're going to focus a little bit more on the 80s portion of it. Welcome in, Sydney. How are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Pleasure's ours. Pleasure's ours. First of all, let me ask you this. What got you interested in pursuing the music industry in the way that you have?
It's an interesting story because I've always loved music. Growing up, as I'm sure we'll get into, specifically with rock music and classic rock and 80s metal and all that. I was very immersed in it through my parents. Was always around. So I'd always loved music, but I never really thought about a career in music. It's funny, I actually in high school for a long time thought I was going to go to school for like zoology. I loved animals, and very very shortly into that I was like, it's just the way my brain's wired. I did well in school, but I just was not math and science oriented. So I was like, man, what am I gonna do? Because if I go to college for zoology, I'm gonna fail out of it. Right. So I actually had met a friend who is in Alice Cooper's camp. And I've known him since I was about 15, and I found out that he went to school for music business. And it kind of just all clicked for me. I didn't realize that you could go to school for that. It was, I don't know why. I thought, growing up, it was just like, this just idea I had in my head that, you have to know somebody to know somebody, to know somebody to get into this. Sure. And you do in a way, but, there's a place you can start, and college was that for me. So I decided to look at different schools for music business, picked one, got in, went, and through that journey I got into journalism and started to write for websites, and then that led into doing stuff for my college radio station, which led into my podcast. And now I work for 93.3 WMMR here in Philly, which is one of the biggest active rock stations in the country, which blows my mind that I can even say that. Yep. So it was just this weird, but wonderful, unexpected journey kind of that happened. So it was interesting, and I'm happy to be here doing it. So
even in the Nashville area, I've heard of that channel, and actually have been on some of their live streaming stuff. So we're very familiar with that particular station in Philly. Let me ask you this. I thought this would be pretty cool. I've got a list of about 5 heavy metal bands or solo artists, and what I want you to do is kind of describe what you think makes them what they are, what kind of sticks out to you, and then get your feedback on them. And then what's interesting, I want to let you add a few that's not on here.
Okay, cool.
All right. I've got to start with one of my all-time favorites, Motley Crue. What sticks out to you about them?
Oh, Motley Crue, I mean, them for me go, way back to, like I said, listening to metal with my parents when I was young. For me, they were kind of the beginnings of the 80s metal. Like, it's a very weird term. People don't like it, but for lack of a better one, hair metal kind of scene that happened in the 80s. So they were kind of the beginning of that. Obviously you had influence wise, you had like Van Halen and those kind of bands that influenced them, but they were kind of the beginning of, Shout at the Devil, glammed out makeup, hair, and then you saw Rat start to do it, and you saw Name Any Band, and then eventually it went to the Poison level and that kind of thing, but they were kind of the beginning of that. And Shout at the Devil, what was so great about that is that, they had the look and they had this image that kind of shocked people at first, but they had the music and it was heavy and, dare I say a little controversial, even though, it was shout
Mhm.
at the devil, not shout with the devil, as, they say,
Yeah,
but
that's right.
it had a little bit of controversy. And it was, like I said, kind of that whole beginning of at least the scene that's one of my favorites
Yeah.
in rock, history. So I love Motley Crue. I always have. They did great stuff, all the way up to even Saints Los Angeles, which is, for me, kind of the last, notable
Yeah.
project that they
Yeah.
did. So I love Motley Crue. I got nothing bad to say.
God, awesome. How about Judas Priest?
Judas Priest, right up there with one of the innovators of heavy metal. Truly, we just, funny enough, on this show that I guest on this channel, Sea of Tranquility, on YouTube last night, we just had this album battle between Screaming for Vengeance and
Oh, wow.
Maiden, Number of the Beast. And really, I had recently dived back into those albums because of that conversation.
Uh-huh.
And they really were just such innovators of what became, again, later 80s metal. They had the melody, they had the heaviness. Again, even going back to look, which is something when we talk about metal in the 80s specifically, like I mentioned with Crew, is a huge thing. They had the spikes and the leather. And I mean, without Judas Priest, none of that would exist. Motley Crue wouldn't exist with that, and
Yeah.
they were highly influential. I love Judas Priest. I'm a little iffy on what they're doing right now with their guitar situation.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you saw that, but they just got rid of their second guitar player, Andy Sneap, which that's a little confusing right now with Judas Priest. But as for their influence in them in general, I love Priest, and there's no denying what they did for the genre for sure.
Yeah. What was cool, I think they were probably one of my first concerts that I actually seen in Nashville back in '84.
Yeah.
The Defenders of the
Nice.
Faith tour is the one
Yep.
that just the show presence that they put on would stick out to somebody. You have to see a show that they do. Yeah,
It's
amazing stuff.
Yeah, they're fantastic. I mean, Rob Halford is
Yeah.
still doing it. I know that, they had the
Showman.
fallout with Kate.
That's right.
Yeah, there's no denying the greatness that is Rob Halford and Judas
Yeah.
Priest for sure.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's go a solo artist. How about Ozzy, of course?
Oh, you're picking all my favorites. Yeah, I mean, Ozzy is one of those artists that, again, was very present in my upbringing. So I was listening to Ozzy very young. He gave me some of, my favorite music, and, my favorite guitar player is Randy Rhoads. So,
Oh gosh, yeah.
I mean, phenomenal. And those first two records, solo records, Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, are some of my favorite albums ever done. And I mean, again, he's one of those people that is just such a rock staple. I couldn't imagine what the genre would be without his influence.
Yeah.
I mean, you look back towards, obviously, him not as a solo artist, but with Black Sabbath.
Right.
That, to me, I always said that I believe that Black Sabbath really started the heavy metal genre, in my personal opinion. So, I mean, he's one of the forefathers of heavy metal to me. So seeing what he did solo, to me, is just as good as what he did with Black Sabbath, which I know is kind of a controversial topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ozzy's one of my favorites. He's hilarious. He's a comic. He's a comic genius without trying to be.
That's true.
He's one of the funniest people in rock and roll, and he doesn't even know it. So yeah, I mean, I love Ozzy. Again, he's one of the forefathers of heavy metal to me. So definitely none of the other bands, besides probably Alice Cooper, who's my number one. Any of the other bands that I really, really, really love, wouldn't be around without the influence of Black Sabbath and Ozzy. So
okay, I won't bring up Alice, but I had him on there, so we'll wait. We'll let you do that one. Quiet Riot.
Quiet Riot, another band that had Randy Rhoads in it early on.
I'm a big fan of his as well.
Yeah, Randy's just the best. And, of course, you got Rudy Sarzo, and who recently just rejoined the band, which is pretty great. But yeah, I mean, Quiet Riot, they have some of the most notable songs from the 80s that people who aren't heavy metal fans know, Metal Health, Come On Feel the Noise, you can play any of those songs.
Made it
And
into movie debuts,
yeah,
like
yeah,
Footloose. The
right.
song plays in Footloose, yeah, where you wouldn't think it would be.
No, I remember hearing that or
Exactly.
seeing, Footloose,
Yeah.
and be like, oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's notable in pop culture, it's got
Yeah.
the same kind of
Exactly.
notoriety as like I Want to Rock by Twisted Sister. It has that same kind of
Right.
carry on.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, Quiet Riot, they have great songs that aren't just the hits. So,
Yeah.
like I said, Randy Rhoads, that's kind of the earlier years. But the lineup that everybody knows was, the Metal Health record. And, I love Quiet Riot 3, which is another great record. Yeah, so, I mean, Kevin DeBro really worked his ass off. Can I say ass on
you're
here?
fine. You're fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
He really worked his ass off on that band.
Yeah.
And, rest in peace to him, because he sadly passed away a couple years ago. But
Sure.
he worked really hard, and I mean, like we mentioned, he made his mark. So
Yeah.
good job.
Awesome. I'm going to leave you with one more, and then I'll let you add a couple that I've left off here.
Okay.
How about AC/DC?
Rock legends, simply rock legends.
Yeah.
I mean, their latest record was just like, for being around for 50 years or almost 50 years, and to release a record that great almost 50 years into your career is insane. They're just, Angus Young still has the energy. Brian Johnson still sounds phenomenal, even though he had that hearing scare a couple years ago. Just, they're monsters, man. They're incredible.
Sure. Okay. Add a couple that I'm missing here.
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned it before, but Alice Cooper is my number one.
Yeah, I had him on there.
Yeah, he's my number one.
Awesome performer.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I'm a huge theatrical rock fan.
Yes.
So I love all of which, makes sense, because, like I mentioned, the 80s had a lot of that theatrical image thing. And so I love that. And the great thing about Alice is he has so many different eras and versions of himself that, you have the 70s classic rock Alice, and then you have the 80s metal Alice, and you have the industrial Alice, and then the return to classic rock Alice. He's done so much over the course of his career that there's so much to enjoy. Right. And he's nailed kind of every era that he's done, in my opinion. He is also one of the nicest people you will ever meet. He's, to me, the nicest person in rock and roll. He really is. He is humble and treats every fan, crew member, literally everybody like they're just a person. They're on the same level as him. He's not Alice Cooper. He's just the guy. So, I mean, I could go on and on about Alice forever, but he's my favorite person, and his music has definitely changed my life. So, trying to think of others. Dokken is another one of my favorite bands.
Cool. Yes.
Which, if people are listening who are familiar with me, I mention Dokken all the time, but Dokken's another one of my favorites, probably my favorite 80s metal band. They're underrated in my opinion. Phenomenal records, really catchy hooks. George Lynch is another one of my favorite guitar players. Definitely one of the kings of shred of that time period, and just killer. Tesla is another one of my favorites. It's really underrated. Tesla. Queensryche's another one that's one of my favorites.
Yes.
Operation Mindcrime isn't underrated, but some of their other stuff is a little bit more not as well known. Love Queensryche. Dio, I can't not mention Dio, and both Sabbath and solo. Just, I mean, one of my heroes. He's just phenomenal. And miss him so much too. I can't believe it's been over a decade since he passed away. But Dio, I mean, there's others that I'm sure I'm going to pop in my head, but those are just a couple.
Yeah. Okay. You led me kind of into the next question, and I think I already kind of know the answer now that you've said it. But I'm gonna see if something else pops out to you on this.
Okay.
What is one of your most favorite interviews or people that you've met in the business?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the easiest answer is Alice Cooper, but since I
Yeah,
just said that, I'm not gonna
yeah,
repeat that.
yeah.
Um, my favorite, and this ties in with one of my favorite interviews, but also one of the nicest people I've ever
Hmm.
known is
Hmm.
Jeff Pilson from Dokken. He is
Oh,
one
wow.
of the.
Okay.
He also plays in Foreigner now.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
so
Right.
communicated with him when I was, for the first time, when I was 17 or 18, and I was starting my radio show in college, and
Okay.
I needed an interview. Yeah, I needed an interview,
Yeah.
and I messaged him on Instagram because I was like, I'm gonna try. And he got back to me, and he said yes, and he did it. And for the last 5 or 6
Yeah.
years, we've stayed in contact, and I've gotten to interview him at foreigner shows, and he's been just so extremely supportive of my career and just my journey in the industry.
Yeah.
And also does so much. I mean, he was in Dokken, and yeah, he's in Foreigner, but he's a record producer
Yeah.
and a songwriter outside of just the bands he's in. He's so talented, and so
Talented.
many
Right.
people
Right.
know that about him. So he's got to be my answer for that one.
Yeah. Fantastic. That's a great story. Um,
Yeah.
Let me ask this, because my buddy DH is not here. Didn't mention that at the start of the show. He had a family emergency. We missed DH. Wish he was here. He'll be back.
We miss you.
Uh, and pretty cool. We got to talk before he left today. He wanted me to mention this to you and see what you thought. The hair metal versus the heavy metal. What's your
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
this is such a debated
Mm,
question, and so hard for me to answer because a lot of the time I do think of the hair metal and heavy metal, being in the same league. Definitely
mm.
different eras. They
Yeah, right.
have you see a lot of what people refer to as just heavy metal as being, late 70s, early 80s. And then, stuff like Black Sabbath and, early Led Zeppelin and stuff like that,
Hmm. Hmm.
prior to what we now know as heavy metal. But yeah, then you get the kind of the negative connotation around hair metal, and is it
Right.
all about image, and is it really hard rock music? And I mean, yes, there are some bands that I definitely agree, took it a little too far, and maybe at the end there, that era were a little bit more pop rocky rather than just metal. But like,
Hmm.
to me, bands like Motley Crue and Queensryche and Rat and Quiet Riot, and I mean, to me, they all fall under the heavy metal genre. um then you have bands like Motorhead, which I see as metal, but Lemmy thought he was more of hard rock. So it's a really hard question to nail down because I think for everybody it's a little bit different.
Their opinion.
um
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's just really hard to decide on one specific, is it hair metal or heavy metal, or and I'm notice with a lot of these guys, they don't really like the term hair metal. It's a kind of a derogatory thing to a lot of them.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
See that? Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So it's
Interesting.
definitely a difficult question, but it's different for everybody.
Gotcha. 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 Um, while we're talking 80s music in general, 80s metal, why do you think 80s music is still hanging around like it is? Why is it so popular to all these different people, young people as well?
Right. That's a question I've actually haven't thought of before. And I mean, speaking from personal experience, it's a little bit different because like I said, I had such an influence growing up. I
Hmm.
didn't
Hmm.
there are people that I know that discovered, 80s metal, or even like just 80s music in general, 80s films, 80s culture, through friends or, by themselves. Um, but I, had people who my parents were teenagers in the 80s, so I, grew up around it, and they, all the movies and everything. So I guess it's just it's obviously tied to the past, but I'm also thinking about you know, my dad tells me all the time, when he was a teenager, they thought the 60s were great, like
Mm-hmm.
they wish they could have lived in the
Mm-hmm.
60s.
Mm-hmm.
He wishes, he could have been around for Woodstock. So, I mean, it's also that kind of generational thing of like, you always love and want,
Yeah.
right now isn't, cutting it for you. You want to experience things that you've learned about and, whatever. But I mean, for
Seem
me,
like
like I
great
said,
times. Yeah.
they seemed, I always go back to that. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. I'm sure you have, Dazed and Confused.
Yes.
And the redhead in that movie goes, you know, the 60s rocked and the 70s totally sucked, and like let's hope the 80s are better. And you
Right.
look back at her and you're like, I can't believe you just said the 70s sucked. Because I think right now suck. It's like that kind of thing.
Exactly.
So it's that. And I mean, like I said, for me, I also think part of it is, the influence that was had because of my parents, but
Yeah.
also, for me, that also brought a sense of, even though I wasn't around in the 80s, that has brought a sense of nostalgia to me because it reminds me of my childhood, and discovering that stuff. Also, I love the vibe of the 80s in general for me, but the more I think about it, sometimes I'm like, I listened and I watched so much 80s stuff when I was young that I wonder if also a part of it now for me is that I feel nostalgic for childhood and that kind of thing. So, I mean, like I said, I think it might be different for everybody, but
Sure.
that's kind of the best guess I have as to why
Yeah.
it's so big now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think people are, especially with times like they are now with all that's going on the plate, but
Right.
people are searching for, man, that looked like a fun time. And it was.
Yeah.
Going through that decade.
Carefree.
Yeah.
At least to me, it seemed like, you see movies and, like you
It
could,
was
even something as simple as, when I was a kid, I would want to, like go out, like with my friends or whatever and come back and not have be, but the world is different today. So, when my parents were kids, they could go out and they could come home when it gets dark or whatever. And no, their parents weren't like, oh God, where are you? But the world is so different today that
Exactly.
there's different ways of
People are
life.
searching for that. Yeah. They're searching for those kind of releases. That's right. Yeah. Because we like to tell people on the show here, these pictures behind us, that's our graduation pictures, our high school graduation pictures.
I love that.
So, it was just a different time, a fun time.
Right.
And a lot of great musicians, like we've talked about. It was just a great time with movies and music to be in that decade. Closing out here, where can people follow you and find out more information and listen to you? Didn't get a chance to listen, but I'm going to when you're on, because I'm old, so it's hard for me to stay up late. So I actually fell asleep. I seen where you were going to be on. And I was like, I'm going to catch some of her show, and of course fell asleep. So give us a. Yeah,
it's one of those things where my friends will be like, I wish I could have on during normal people hours. I'm like, I mean, unfortunately, the radio station, the great thing about MMR is that there's always a live person on 24/7, 365 a year, Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, literally there's always a person, which is so great. But yeah, I mean, I do fill-ins right now for MMR. I'm on the air. The next time I'll be on the air is not sure when this will be airing, but this weekend I'm going to be on 2 nights. So if people want to stay up to date just to see when I'll be on, you can follow me on Twitter at @STaylorOfficial. I'm also on Instagram at Sydney Anna Taylor. And most importantly, you can get my podcast and all that stuff on my website, which is metalfromtheinside.com. So if you are having trouble finding me, I have direct links to everybody there.
Point at it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. My podcast is Metal from the Inside, and we stream anywhere you get podcasts. So you can go to our website, and all of my personal social links are there too. So yeah.
Sure. Awesome. Sydney, thank you for your time today. It was
thank you
fun.
So much for
Appreciate
having
it.
me on.
Yeah.
It was really fun. Thank you. I get to
Yeah.
talk about my favorite things. So
Yeah, yeah, and we'll holler back at you about that for sure. Yeah, you'll be able to, guys, you'll be able to catch this on our YouTube channel. I'll have it out tonight, and this is November 11th. So I'll have it posted on the YouTube channel by tonight, and then I'll transfer it over to the podcast for our podcast folks. We have the two different listeners. I'll have that in a few days, but yeah, I'll send you the link and all that good stuff where you can put it on or do whatever you want to do with it as well.
awesome. I appreciate that.
All right. So this is DC. DH, take care, buddy. We'll have you back in the seat here next to me on the next one. I think we got an awesome young 18-year-old guitarist that's going to be on from the Chicago area. I think he's on with us next week. He's got an awesome story. So we'll be posting stuff about that on Twitter, that you get to know Peter a little bit. So Sydney from Philadelphia, thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All
I
right.
appreciate you guys.
All right. All right. Take care. And that'll be it, guys. From DC, take care, and we'll see you next time on the podcast.